Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be heading into the book of Numbers.
Oh, Numbers. Very exciting.
Yeah, chapters 1 through 4 specifically, where we're looking for those hidden insights, those nuggets of wisdom from the Israelites and their wilderness journey,
Yeah.
And our source material for this deep dive comes from a document called, well, it's a straightforward title,
Oh,
Order and Purpose in the Wilderness.
straightforward. I like it.
But don't let that fool you, because this deep dive, I think, is going to be anything but straightforward.
Right.
This is one of those deep dives where if you've ever felt lost or maybe you're questioning your purpose, we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Stick around.
Yeah.
Because this one might have some answers for you. So to kick things off, right out the gate in Numbers, we have the Israelites fresh out of Egypt. They're wandering in the wilderness, no home,
Yeah.
no permanent address.
Yeah, it's a tough time.
And then God tells Moses, take a census. Count all the men 20 years and older. Now, I got to ask, what's the point of a head count in the middle of nowhere?
It's a great question. And, on the surface, it seems kind of like a weird thing to do, right? But it's not just about record keeping. Think of it more like setting up the foundation
Okay.
for a company, You got to know who your people are, right? Where they fit.
Right. The organizational chart?
Exactly. It's about establishing order.
Okay.
Creating that sense of identity, that belonging, and that becomes the very foundation for this incredible journey they're about to embark on.
So it's less about the numbers themselves.
Yes.
And more about what those numbers represent.
Exactly.
Okay, so God's kind of setting the stage saying, all right, team, here's who we are.
Yeah.
And here's where we stand.
Right.
Now let's get organized.
Yes.
And speaking of organized, God gets even more specific, right? It's not just a head count. It's also about where each tribe camps out.
You got it. Each tribe gets assigned their own specific spot, all circling around the tabernacle, with God's presence right smack dab in the center.
So God's at the heart of it all.
Literally at the heart.
Yeah.
Now that's powerful, isn't it?
It is. Now just imagine for a second if our society was structured that way today.
Ooh.
Faith, community, right at the center.
I mean, think about that.
It's mind-blowing. But hold on, there's more. God doesn't stop there. He introduces banners
Yes.
and leaders for each tribe.
The original logos.
Yeah.
Visual representation of each tribe.
Okay, what's the thinking behind that?
Well, it shows God cares about structure
Okay.
and good leadership. Still relevant today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. So we got the census, designated camp locations, banners, leaders. It's like building a company from scratch.
It is. God's the ultimate entrepreneur.
Right. But then he takes it a step further and sets apart a specific group of people, the Levites,
Yeah,
for a very specific purpose.
absolutely. The Levites, descendants of Levi, they were entrusted with, well, think of it like the ultimate responsibility, running the tabernacle, God's house, essentially.
So they were taking care of the maintenance, the worship, all the whole objects inside.
Exactly, keeping everything running smoothly.
Like a dedicated support team.
Yes. And their roles were very, very specific, very detailed.
And then they were divided even further, right?
Yeah.
Into the Kohathites,
Yes.
Gershonites, Merarites.
You got it. Each with their unique set of responsibilities.
Got it.
For instance, the Kohathites. They were in charge of handling the most sacred items, like the Ark of the Covenant. Talk about pressure.
It's like working in a museum, but with priceless artifacts.
More than priceless.
Right.
A level of reverence and respect that's, well, I don't even know if we can comprehend it today.
Makes you think, do we even have that same level of reverence for things you could consider sacred today?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Something to ponder, for sure. But then it gets even more interesting because God didn't just say, hey, Levites, you're in charge. He got very specific about age and maturity when it came to certain tasks.
He did. He knew that certain roles required experience,
Right.
maturity. He instructed Moses to only count Levites between 30 and 50 for the tough jobs.
So God was essentially implementing an age requirement, acknowledging that wisdom and experience are valuable.
You got it. You can't just jump into the deep end right away.
Right. But that doesn't mean younger generations were left out.
No, not at all. They still had important roles. It was more about creating a cycle,
Okay.
Mentorship,
Okay.
passing down knowledge, shared responsibility.
An apprenticeship program.
Exactly. It's preparing them for leadership roles in the future.
That's a powerful lesson for us today. How are we valuing and integrating different age groups in our communities? I mean, do we prioritize mentorship, shared learning? Something to think about.
Definitely. Lots to unpack there.
So we've been talking about how God meticulously set up this community in the wilderness,
Mhm.
right? But let's not forget, they weren't just camping out, they were on a journey
Right.
toward the promised land.
Exactly.
And God, being the ultimate planner, had a very specific way he wanted them to travel.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about the arrangement of the tribes around the tabernacle, which we see in chapters 1 and 2,
Right.
but also their marching formation, When they set out,
Okay.
it was this incredibly organized procession.
So picture this. We've got this massive caravan moving through the desert
Yeah,
with God's presence literally leading the way.
right at the center, carried by the
I mean,
Levites.
can you imagine witnessing that? It must have been breathtaking.
Oh, absolutely.
But
It really emphasizes that God wasn't distant or removed,
right.
He was actively involved in their journey every step of the way.
It really makes you think about how we approach our own lives.
Yeah.
Do we seek God's guidance in our decisions?
hmm
Do we have that same trust that he's leading us towards something bigger?
Especially in a world that encourages self-reliance, it can be easy to forget that we're not meant to do this alone.
Yeah, it's so true.
We can get caught up in doing things our own way, but
Yeah.
we miss out on the incredible guidance and support God offers.
So we've been focusing a lot on the Levites and their responsibilities, but what about the other tribes?
Oh, they were crucial too.
Okay.
They weren't just sitting back watching the Levites do all the work.
Right, so they had their own roles to play.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They were responsible for providing foods, supplies, protection for the entire group.
Okay, so it really was a team effort.
A well-oiled machine,
Mhm.
every part working together towards that common goal. They needed each other to survive, to thrive.
Right. It's like, well, you can think of a sports team,
Yeah.
a company,
Yeah.
a family.
Exactly. Everyone brings their own unique skills and strengths, right? But it's when they come together, support each other, that's when amazing things happen.
And speaking of the Levites and their responsibilities,
Yeah.
I mean, their duties went way beyond just carrying the tabernacle, right?
Oh, yeah.
Things get super specific when it came to packing up
Yes.
and transporting the tabernacle and its furnishings.
Yeah, it was a meticulous process. And remember the Kohathites we talked about earlier?
The ones with the most sacred items.
Exactly. They had a very particular set of instructions, especially when it came to the Ark of the Covenant.
I bet it wasn't just a matter of tossing everything into a giant suitcase.
No, not at all. Chapter 4 goes into great detail about how each item was to be covered, transported. The ark, for instance, had to be covered with a specific cloth, then a layer of badger skin, and then finally a blue cloth on top.
Wow. There were layers to this.
It was an elaborate process for sure. Each layer had a symbolic meaning, reflecting the deep reverence and care they had for these holy items.
Wow, they really went all out. It sounds like an incredibly well choreographed dance,
Hello?
every movement precise, purposeful.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about physically protecting the objects, but also about maintaining that spiritual sanctity.
Oh, right.
These objects represented God's presence among his people.
Right.
Handling them with such care was a way of showing that deep respect and awe towards God.
It's a powerful reminder that even the smallest details can have great spiritual significance.
Yeah.
In our fast-paced world, it's so easy to just rush through things and miss out on those deeper meanings.
Yeah.
Do we take the time to appreciate those moments of reverence in our own lives?
It's a good question. Something to think about for sure.
It's amazing how we find so many parallels to our own lives today in these stories from Numbers.
Oh, it's incredible.
We've been unpacking God's attention to detail,
Mm-hmm.
his focus on order, structure, and his desire to create a community that really reflects his character.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
But before we wrap things up, what's the overarching theme that really emerges from these chapters for you?
It all comes back to God using this very intricate system of order and purpose
Okay.
to shape the Israelites into something truly special,
Mhm.
a people set apart.
So it wasn't just about efficiency or survival. It was about something much deeper.
Exactly. It was about transformation, from the inside out.
And that idea of being set apart, that's not just some ancient concept, is it?
Not at all. It's just as relevant today, We're called to be a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation.
Okay, so how do we live out this calling in a world that often feels, the opposite of holy?
It starts with understanding who we are in Christ.
Okay.
We're not defined by the world's standards, but by God's grace,
Right.
and his purpose for our lives.
And like we've seen in Numbers, that purpose is often revealed through those roles and responsibilities that we're given.
Absolutely. It's about taking ownership of those roles, no matter
Mhm.
how small they might seem, and approaching them with excellence,
Right.
integrity,
Mm.
and a deep awareness that God is right there with us.
It's like that verse in Colossians, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters.
Exactly. We can turn even the most ordinary tasks into acts of worship.
Powerful stuff. This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It really has.
We've learned so much about God's heart for order, purpose, community,
Mhm.
and how those principles can still guide us today. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
It's easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life and kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right.
But remember, the Israelites, wandering in that wilderness,
Mm.
let their story inspire you to live a life of purpose,
Right.
order, and unwavering faith.
This has been a fantastic exploration of numbers, and remember, this is just the beginning. Keep diving deep, explore these chapters for yourselves, and see what other treasures you can uncover. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep living out your purpose.